Apple seedlings. Are these of no consequence? Should be. Should they be of consequence? Should it matter that I'm able to plant seeds and see what they'll turn into? Give it a name, propagate it, give some trees to people to grow these apples. I want to just mention that I read a brief article that earlier this spring there's a GMO apple now approved for production. And this starts something that I don't find unexpected for apple, being the major crop that it is. There are some other kinds of fruits that may have a different reaction to. In a way, I'd expected this. I hoped that it might not happen. What I've done here is transplant a seedling, a seed I took from an apple called Jefferus, an heirloom variety. And now that it's got a set of true leaves, I'm transplanting it into a pot that will grow in this year. If it grows vigorously, I may transplant it into a larger pot in the summer. And what I'm doing with apple seedlings, here are a few more. Seedlings from heirloom varieties. Don't quite know what I'll get until they fruit. And it's fun. It's something about anybody could do with an apple seed and a place to plant a tree after it's been in a pot for a year or two. And if it turned into something, was propagated in a nursery and got into an orchard, it could provide some genetic diversity in the orchard. What I wanted to talk about, that GMO issue, is that now what I do and what I would like to teach my kids, perhaps produce a second generation with them a little bit down the line, is completely threatened. If pollen from GMO apples gets on the trees that I'm taking fruit from and ultimately taking seed from and growing into trees, I'm at risk for a lawsuit if those GMO genes were in my new apple variety. And besides that, I wouldn't want them there. I believe the traits that we desire are going to be available from related species. The various types of apples, maybe not that you'd find in a typical orchard, but if you look around, you might find a place that's got 100 or 200 different varieties of the heirlooms. there's also related species of apples, or perhaps other related pome fruits with traits that can be utilized. I know it's considered a tool, GMO, but it's not always used in its right form. I know I read about in a scientific journal, and this is going back more than 12 years, of an apple, two actually, an eating apple and a rootstock that had a gene inserted from a type of moth for bacterial resistance, specifically for resistance to fire blight disease. And they produced this in their research and tested the trees, and they did have increased resistance to fire blight. Well, it's also been pointed out that this type of resistance is probably not going to be a long-term solution, because resistance and susceptibility to fire blight depends on more than one gene. It's unfortunate that those breeders or researchers went far beyond related plants related to apples, but even outside of the plant kingdom to an animal. And this, I don't think it's responsible. But besides the implications of that, what I'm doing here, I'd like to teach my children to do. And besides affecting me, that probably won't affect me in the next 10 years. These trees won't be in orchards nearby where I'm working. But like I say, the next generation's affected, whether it's my children or anybody wants to do some plant breeding that's not part of a lab that's being funded by a corporation. Basically, these patents that the courts have decided extends to the pollen from these plants is these patents are owned by corporations or whoever it is that owns them. Well, you could see a different perspective and say, well, they need to keep their pollen off of my farm. I think it's unfortunate the courts ruled it like that, because it takes away the traditional practice of seed saving. One of the first things I read about GMO long ago, I believe it was a National Geographic magazine, and a farmer had lost a court case who had not used GMOs, but he saved seed from his corn like he always did, his parents had always did. And some neighboring farm had GMO, and so when he replanted his seed, he had the GMO genes in his field, and he got sued. So that's the threat here. It directly affects what I'm doing, and I think there's a principle that's been violated here. But anyway, I'll try to keep upbeat about it. Not all the fruit crops I'm working with have got GMOs approved and in the fields, in the orchards. But anyway, for now I'm planting seeds from heirlooms, and we'll see what happens.